For many, many years, the Japanese katana has captured the imagination of countless generations and is probably one of the world's most recognizable and most iconic swords. And I managed to get my hands on a real one. So, since I'll be talking about very traditional things today and about history, I decided to wear my yukata out of respect for the topic. If you're interested, I can make a separate video about yukata, kimono, and other traditional clothes, so please let me know in the comments. Anyway, let's start with a little bit of history. The katana is actually neither the first nor the oldest type of Japanese sword, though it's certainly the most famous. Its precursor was the tsurugi, a type of double-edged sword which was made and used from the 5th up until the 9th century. These blades were inspired by the Chinese sword, though they differ from the Chinese style in both the length and shape. This period, up until the 9th century, is called Jokoto, and it's the first of the 5 periods of Japanese sword production. The other 4 are called Koto, or old swords, from around 900 to 1596, Shinto, or new swords, from 1596 to 1780, Shinshinto, or new swords, from 1781 to 1876, and Gendaito, modern or contemporary swords, from 1876 to the present. The development of the katana throughout the ages was heavily influenced by the style of warfare at the time. Much can be said about Japanese turbulent history of old, but to avoid turning this video into a 3-hour lecture, let's just say that katana is a very broad and general term used to refer to Japanese swords or nihonto. You see, the tsurugi I mentioned a few moments ago was double-edged, right? So katana comes from kata, meaning one-sided, and na, meaning blade. Therefore, the term refers to all one-sided blades in production from the 9th century. The proper term for what we normally call katana is uchigatana, but for the sake of simplicity I'll keep referring to this type of sword as katana throughout the video. And there are actually quite a few types of Japanese swords. Some of the more famous ones are the aforementioned tsurugi, also called ken. Older styles of very long single-edged swords called odachi and tachi, the medium-length wakizashi, and the shortest tanto, which is basically the size of an average knife. But there are others as well. Essentially, the biggest difference between swords worn by the samurai is in length and orientation. For example, the tachi is usually around 80 centimeters long and is carried blade side down, whereas the katana is anywhere from 60 to 90 centimeters and is worn blade side up. One other difference is the angle of curvature, but to the untrained eye, both of these types of swords look exactly the same. Originally, katanas were made entirely by hand, painstakingly slowly, and much of the original process is sadly lost to the ages. What we do know, however, is that the best steel for making katana is called tamahagane. It's made from iron sand, heated over charcoal, which then absorbs a certain amount of carbon from that charcoal, but does not melt entirely. It is this chemical process that gives birth to samurai sword-grade steel. It takes immense experience to be able to gauge the amount of carbon in the steel, just from the color it gets when heated. Thus, today there are only a handful of people in the world capable of making true tamahagane. Same can unfortunately be said about sword makers. Once the tamahagane is obtained from the ore, it gets repeatedly folded over itself, creating up to 5,000 individual layers in order to distribute the carbon equally. And it's ultimately forged by hand into a shell which will house the softer metal core. And it is this combination of soft and hard metal which gives the Japanese katana its unparalleled power. The hard edge can be made as sharp as a razor blade, and the soft core provides a sort of amortization effect to the sword, preventing the hard steel from breaking, bending, or cracking during use. There are different ways of laminating the sword or combining the soft and hard metal, each with its own advantages and disadvantages. Finally, the sword maker traces a pattern on the blade using 2 mixtures of clay, charcoal, and water in varying proportions. The exact recipe for this concoction is kept a secret, but the reason for doing so is to cool different areas of the blade at different speed. Once the sword is quenched in water, the result is what is known as a hamon, or the wavy line on the edge of the blade. This hamon is as unique as a fingerprint. Since it's made by hand, no two are exactly the same. With the sword complete, it's now time for the polishing and sharpening, which is done by a master sword polisher over a period of 10 days on average. He uses a range of stones, some of which are centuries old, because it is said that each sword needs a different combination of stones to bring out its true inner beauty. So, in essence, it takes 3 master craftsmen and numerous apprentices, sometimes up to a year, to create the true katana. One master makes the tamahagane, another forges the sword, and the third one gives it its final edge and luster. No wonder, then, that a sword of this quality, made entirely by hand, following traditional methods, can cost up to $50,000 at a reputable distributor. Well, I was fortunate enough to have a friend who is descended from samurai, and they were kind enough to agree to let me borrow their great-great-grandfather's sword for the purposes of this video. So, here it is. A real Japanese katana. Philip, if you're watching this, now is a good chance to switch to HD and go full screen. The scabbard of the sword, unfortunately, had to be replaced in more modern times. But this does not diminish its historical value. If we look at the sword more closely, we can see the different parts which make up a Japanese katana. This here is called the tsuka, or the hilt, and it's wide enough to be grasped by both hands. The joint between the hilt and the blade consists of 4 parts. This outer ring is called fuchi. This here is the tsuba, or crossguard. Notice the wonderful koi fish pattern on the guard. This golden ring at the very seam on both sides is called seppa. And finally, this part here is the habaki, or similar to rain guard on European swords. If we look at the blade itself, it has 8 different points of interest, but for us only 3 are important. Those are nagasa, or length, hamon, or this wavy line, and ha, or the blade itself. To be called the katana, the sword must be at least 60 centimeters or 24 inches long. This one has a nagasa, or length, of 73. The hamon is quite traditional and almost symmetrical on both sides. Interestingly enough, because of the chemical composition achieved by cooling different areas at different speeds, this part of the edge can never be polished to mirror finish like the rest of the blade. Finally, the edge itself, or ha. If we look at this sword closely, we can see that it is completely blunt. So, apparently, there are special regulations in Japan for owning authentic swords. Basically, if you own a true katana and you want to keep it as is, in other words, sharp, there are many permits you need to apply to, and huge procedure for being approved, which takes a lot of time, costs a lot of money, and needs to be renewed on a regular basis. Because a real katana, a true katana, can be used to, well, kill somebody. I mean, it's a lethal weapon, much like owning a gun. So, to avoid all of the hassle and unnecessary expenses, many people in Japan who have inherited swords from their ancestors opt to have the blade dulled, so that the sword can be registered as a martial arts practice blade and not as a real sword. since it can no longer cut. And that's precisely what happened to this sword. Sad, I know, but necessary. Because otherwise, it would probably be confiscated and or destroyed by the police. So, all in all, that's about everything I had to say for this video. What did you think about my friend's great-great-grandfather's sword? Well, I thought it was awesome, and I really enjoyed holding a piece of history in my hands. Thanks a lot for watching, have a wonderful time, and I will see you in the next video.